Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Today, India prides itself on being secular, and people forget that historically India has always been secular. However, the modern concept of secularism doesn't gel with the Indian old concept. The Indian concept was that everybody is equal and religion should not be dividing line. But over 1,000 years of slavery, first to the Islam, then to the British, made them feel that there were some religions which were more favored than the others. Islam in the beginning, and then Christianity and Islam. There were periods when secularism was there, as in Punjab during Ranjit Singh's time. And now people blame Jawaharlal Nehru for being pro-Muslim and imposing secularism. Now let me give you a shock. Nehru was a secular, having been educated in the Western system. But ironically, it was Nehru and another person, B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee of the Constitution of India. These two people were the main people who opposed the idea of including secular in the preamble of the Constitution. And yet, ignorant people, people who haven't studied, who don't know the facts, blame Nehru for that. I'm not holding a brief for Nehru, no. I agree he was a great man and he had certain faults. Who doesn't have? I remember it was November 15, 1948 evening, and the newly independent Dominion of India was having a very heated debate in the Constituent Assembly, which is now the Parliament of India. And the purpose was what should be the nature of the Constitution. Written, of course, it had to be, and it became the longest written Constitution, the largest one in the world. Should it be secular? Should it be socialist? Should it be federal? And so on and so forth. There was one member, K.T. Shah. He wanted the word secular in the preamble of the Union. The preamble is, we the people of India give to ourselves. It's not a grant by anybody, it's the people who give. And he said, sir, I beg to move that the clause 1 of the article shall be the word secular, federalist, and socialist be included. And the amended article shall read as follows: India shall be a secular, federalist, secularist, socialist union of states. In the ensuing discussion, while the members agree on the nature of the Indian state adhering to a secular principle, the word secular was dropped because it could have a negative connotation. However, 30 years later on, Indira Gandhi led government included it through 42nd Amendment of the Constitution. And she added the word secular and socialist. Till that time, though Nehru was following the socialist policies and the mixed economy and secular policies, but then there were some things which showed, for example, Hindu Marriage Act, applicable to Hindus. Why should there not have been, if India was secular? At that time, Hindu Marriage Act would have been declared unconstitutional because the Constitution, being secular, would have said what is applicable to one religion shall be applicable to all. But since at that time, the country was not secular as far as the Constitution was concerned. Now, in the decades that followed, secularism in Indian constitution has been appreciated by some and criticized by some, who have repeatedly pointed to the foreign origin of the word. I told you very clearly in the beginning that the applicability of the word secularism in the Indian context has been problematic. Independent government implemented secularism by refusing to recognize the religious past of the Indian nationalism, whether it was Islamic, Muslim, or Hindu or Sikh. The politics was permeated by religion. Look at Tilak, the father of the Indian freedom movement. He started the movement for Ganesh Chaturthi celebrations. Wasn't it a religious revivalism? So, while retaining the personal law of the Muslim, the Hindu Marriage Act was created, and this created an inconsistency. So India lost the right to be secular. Now, how did the word secular originate? It originated late medieval Europe. Secularism, the theory of the government ought to have no religion connection, or indeed anything to do with the religion belief, is manifest a Western concept, especially a product of the Protestant Reformation and Enlightenment. If Henry VIII marriage had been approved by the Pope, then secularism would not have been there because the king was the defender of faith in India. Any king had to undergo the secular, not the secular, but the religious Tilak ceremony. So the secularism, the theory that the government ought to have no religious connection, nor anything to do with the matters of religious belief, is manifestly a product of the Protestant Reformation. So secularism is ideal, theoretical base of a nation state, and it was utilized by the European continent, even USA and Turkey. So majority of the makers of modern India, whether it was Nehru or Ambedkar or Gandhi, they were educated in the Western system, European thoughts, practices, and they were ardent supporters of secularism and socialism. The first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, for him having a secular state was a crucial mark of modernity. But still, he was far-sighted and he said, no, this would go against the basic system, thought pattern of India. Now, he said in the Constituent Assembly, we have only done something which every country does, except for a few misguided backward countries. And the word secularism originated in the late medieval Europe, especially with the Protestant Reformation. He said, no, this word doesn't suit the psyche of India. So, this word secular, as I said later on, was incorporated way back later, 30 years after the Constituent Assembly was concerned. Now, if you look at the debate in the Constituent Assembly, when the preamble was discussed, all members agreed on the necessity of having a secular state. Even Shyama Prasad Mukherjee, the father of Johnson, the original incarnation of BJP, was in favor of secularism. The only two persons opposed it, that is Dr. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru. And most shared an understanding of the history in the movement for the separation of religion and state as irrevocably a part of the project of democratization for the latter. So connection between secularism and effective function had been established in Europe, and they thought if it has been successful in Europe, it will be successful in India. However, the debates made clear the ambiguity inherent in the terminology when applied to Indian context. questions were raised regarding the nature of its application. And one member, Loknath Mishra, I quote him, I accepted this secularism in the sense that our state shall remain unconcerned with religion, and I thought that the secular state of the partition India was the maximum generosity of a Hindu-dominated territory for non-Hindu. Now, look at the word generosity. So it was a gift to the minorities. And that started the heart burning. If it had been said, well, look here, this is effect of nature. Hindu religion believes the whole world as one family. Then this heart burning would not have been there. And then he goes on to say, I did not, of course, know exactly what secularism meant. So people who did not even understand secularism were talking of secularism. Isn't that ironical and absolutely unimaginable? To my mind, life cannot be compartmentalized, and yet I am reconciled to the new cry. Do we really believe, then he went on to say, that religion can be divorced from life? Or is it our belief that in the midst of many religions, we cannot decide which one to accept? And then he said something very important. If religion is beyond the ken of our state, let's clearly say so and delete all references to the rights relating to the religion. On the other hand, H.C. Mukherjee, Vice President of the Drafting Committee, Dr. Ambedkar was the President. Are we really honest when we say that we are seeking to establish a secular state? If your idea to have a secular state is there, then it follows inevitably that we cannot afford to have recognized minorities based on religion. So, if it was secular, then there should be no minorities. Each are equal. You cannot hunt with a hound and be hunted with a deer. No, you can't do it. You have got to be very clear. So, Nehru and Ambedkar were committed to the ideal of secularism. And they said very clearly, it's ideal to be aimed at one and everyone, whether we are Hindus or Muslims, Sikhs or Christians, whatever we are. None of us can say in the heart of hearts that he has no prejudice, no taint of communalism. So Nehru accepted that communalism was there. So when it came to the use of the word secular, both were worried because this would have destroyed their complete plan. Then you could not have the Hindu Marriage Act, you could not have the Inheritance Act, you could not have the Muslim Law Board, you could not support Hajj subsidy, and so on, and you could not propose and implement intervention in the management of Hindu temples. So, secularism, in the truest meaning of the term, as it was meant to understand the religion, could not be applied to the Indian context. And since the enlightened secularism was, with its core principle of separation, founded on the Protestant concept of religion as essentially a private concern with which state has no legitimate business, it was not going to work in a country like India, where ruler, 80% population at that time, and the poor people were deeply religious. For politics for them could not be divorced from religion, and it had been there from times immemorial. So Ian Copland, one of the commentators at that time and a constitutional expert, said that if you use the word secular, you are being fraudulent. So in order to follow secularism to its form, the state would be disallowed from making any kind of religious intervention. And that was what made. So if that was there, India was not a secular country. So Ambedkar at that time said, what should be the policy of state? How the society should be organized in social and economic sides are the matters that must be decided by the people themselves according to the time and the circumstance. It cannot be laid down in the Constitution because that's destroying democracy. And if that's there, and the people today say we don't want to be secular, then what's the problem? Why the ultra leftists are crying hoarse when the secularism is derided? Now came June 26, 1975. Mrs. Gandhi proclaimed emergency, and this she declared was in response to deep and widespread conspiracy, since she had started introducing progressive measures to benefit common men and women. In the next 2 years, from June 26, 75 to 77, Prime Minister ruled by degree, elections were suspended, thousands were arrested under MISA, and all the political opponents were behind bars. So, when the opposition MPs had been locked away, she had no opposition in the parliament, and then she moved this 42nd Amendment. And the 38th Amendment ensured that no judicial review of the emergency could take place. 39th Amendment stated that the office of the Prime Minister could not be challenged by the Supreme Court, but only by a body constituted by the Parliament. And then 42nd Amendment, it was a 20-page document detailing why it was required. It gave unprecedented powers to Parliament. All parts of the Constitution, including the preamble, were changed. And now the preamble read, earlier it was sovereign democratic republic, now it read sovereign, secular, socialist, democratic republic. And with the passage of this 42nd Amendment, the spirit of secularism, which was never there, was formally inserted into the body of the Constitution. So looking at the historical perspective, secularism as a concept was rejected by the Constituent Assembly. It was not ignored. It was rejected. It was put as an amendment. Now, should we accept it? Yes, we have to, because it was legally approved by the Parliament, maybe with 50% of the members being behind bars. But nowhere does it say that total number of the MPs have to be there. It is always 66% of the MPs present and voting. So the present vote. Now, to talk of India as a secular country in the Western context is a contradiction in terms. And as such, it should not be deemed to be almost a religious responsibility to say we are secular. Let's accept it. India was not secular, and it was accepted by the Constituent Assembly. And this is an imposition. Modi could remove the word secular and we revert back to the original constitution. Both socialist it no longer is. Private enterprise is much more important. So the socialist word is redundant. It's no longer relevant. So similarly, secularism is redundant. And one amendment can be paused. And the amendment shall be that the 42nd Amendment stands repealed and Constitution restored to its original form. That will save a lot of problem and unnecessary responsibilities that are being foisted on the government shall be removed. And then, this heartburning would not be there. So this committee is getting favorable designs. This law is typically against one committee. Now, triple talaq was there. There was nothing wrong with that. And yet there was a hue and cry. So if you have got to be really secular, then be secular. Have one personal code. Or be honest and say, India was not a secular country, it is not a secular, and it shall not be a secular country. Thank you.